Okay, this is part 3 of our Blender 2.8 free training series on making tilted towers. Now that we know a few things about the mirror modifier, let's start using it to make this tower here. So we can start, but we can begin by making this part here and then mirror it around the different areas. So let's add a plane. I'll rotate this 90 degrees. What I usually like to do is under the shading mode, I usually turn on random colors so that I can differentiate between the different objects that I add. So what Blender does, it gives each object you create a slightly different color from the previous one, so that you can easily identify the different objects that you have in the scene. So I like to add that to turn on that feature on so that I can see the different objects. And the other feature I like to add on top of that is cavity. This way that if I add any extrusions or bevels, I can easily see the edges. So they're given that highlight and even that darkening, like there is some kind of ambient occlusion there. So yeah, so I have that turned on. Now that I have that turned on, I can continue making this element here. So the way we're going to do this is that again, we're going to use the mirror modifier. So we can either move the polygons. So I'm working in edit mode, and the way you do that, you just go under object mode, under this drop down menu, and edit mode. This gives you access to all the tools to help you manipulate your polygons. So the first thing you have access to is these modes here. You have the vertex mode. This lets you move around each individual vertex in your scene, or on your mesh. And also have edge mode. This lets you move around or manipulate the different vertices, edges on your object or mesh. And then we have face mode that lets you move around or manipulate the different faces on your object. So you also get access to these tools that you see here. And you can see if we go back to object mode, we don't have access to those, but when we go to edit mode, we can have access to those. So again, as I said, we're not going to look at each one individually. We're just going to look at each one as we start using that part. So as I was saying, we need to use the mirror modifier. So we can go under the modifiers again and turn on the mirror modifier. And again, as I said before, we need these polygons, some polygons, to be on the opposite side of the axis we are mirroring. So if we select this and move these polygons on this side, you can see what we have. But the problem is that we get this gap that we can only fix by moving these around until we close that gap. So it's really hard to get it right here. So what I usually do is instead of just moving the polygons on this side, I usually add a loop here, then delete all the faces on this side. So the way you add a loop is just under these tools here, and there is a loop tool, this loop cut, and you can add it there to basically subdivide this object, in this face, into two. And now we can go to face mode and then select this face and delete that face. Since we have the mirror modifier, it has already mirrored this face onto this side. So if we turn on the mirror modifier again, and again, I don't think I explained, I talked about this. So in the mirror modifier, you have these options up here. You have this render modifier. So if you have this switched on, it means that Blender will render the modifier when you're rendering out the image. If you have that turned off, it means that Blender will not render or compute that modifier when you are rendering. You also have this display modifier in viewport. So if you turn that off, it will mean Blender will not display that modifier. So it's just a way of shutting it off and on. So yeah, so let's insert this part here by adding another loop using the loop cut and then adding it there. And then we can select this edge loop, and then from the previous tutorial, I still have the 3D cursor as my pivot point, so I need to change this back to median point so that I can move my selection from the median point instead of the 3D cursor. So I can can move this edge to around there, and then select this face, and then extrude it. So using the extrude tool to push a connected face inside like that. So another thing to note about extruding is that if you select the extrude tool, make sure you select the plus icon that you see there. Otherwise, if you just hit extrude, it will extrude in any direction. So this just locks it onto that axis there. And so the shortcut for extruding is E, and that will also lock the axis of extrusion to the orientation of the faces. So if you're extruding this and hit E, it will lock that into that axis. So yeah, so so let's make those extrusions. So I can select this, extrude that in, but the problem is that we have these extra faces that we don't need, so we can select them. And the way you select multiple faces is you just hit shift and then select, and then you can hit X and then face to delete those faces. So we have that, but this tower is a bit taller than this, so we can just select, go to edit mode again. Another thing that you might see me do is change between the different shadings. So up here you can see the different shadings we have. You have wireframe, we have shaded mode, we have loop dev, and we also have rendered mode. But for this tutorial, we're going to be using mostly this shaded mode and wireframe. And you can also use the shortcut Z to get this pie menu that you can switch between the different menus. So yeah, so what I want is I'm also using the shortcuts 1, 2, 3 to change between vertex mode, edge mode, and then face mode. So let me select all these vertices up. You can again hold down shift, make sure that we have this set to median point, push those up. You can see this is what we have. And if you look closely, the way this is extruded is not exactly like this, so we can delete these vertices, maybe extend these polygons a bit, and then add a loop here. So you can use the shortcut. So the shortcut for adding a loop like this is just using Ctrl R, and this also allows you make sure if you're using the loop cut shortcut, you don't have the loop cut as icon selected or tool selected. That will mess up a few things. So make sure you have the move tool selected, and then hit Ctrl R. And then this will also let you slide the edge you have selected, the loop you have added. So I want it to be around there. And then we want this to turn into this face that we can extrude out. So you can bevel a vertex, you can bevel an edge like this to have 2 or more edges. So if you select the bevel tool, you can bevel this edge into a face like that. And now we can select the extrude tool, select the face, make sure you are in face mode, select the face, and then extrude it. Make sure you select the plus to extrude it to something like that, and we have that as we want it. So again, we have these faces that are added up that we don't need. And you also notice that I'll be increasing my pace as we go, since I'll be explaining, I've already explained some of the tools we are using. So just to make this a bit faster, so I'll select this. So to select a loop like this, you just hold down Alt and then select the edge loop to select the entire loop like that. So I'll push this up to get something like this. Maybe extend this a bit. But you can see this face here, this shape here is duplicated around to make a cube. So what we can do, again, we can use the mirror modifier. So if I hit copy here, it will just copy the entire modifier here. And what I need to do is mirror this on the Z axis. and maybe move these polygons so that we have this mirrored on the right axis like that. So now any edits I make here will also be made on the other side. But we are left with this gap here, and copying this and using the, say, what axis didn't we use? The y-axis won't give us the results we need. But if we delete this axis, this modifier again, we can make a copy of that. And if we go to the settings here, we can see a few other settings we might use. And as I said, I won't be explaining every tool or that we are going to look at that is in Blender. I'm just going to explain the tools that we are going to use. So there is this mirror object that can let you change the axis, the mirror axis of the mirror modifier. Right now, what the mirror modifier is doing is using the pivot point that you see here as the mirror axis. And if we change this mirror modifier, and if we change this pivot point, we can also we are also changing the pivot, the mirror axis. So say, and there is a tool to change the mirror, the pivot point here. So if you move, say, the cursor to a point to around there, and right click on the object on the mesh, you can change the origin, this origin to be where this cursor is, and you just right click origin to 3D cursor, and that will basically change the 3D point, the origin point to where the 3D cursor is. And you can see that our mirror modifier has also changed in respect to the changes that we have made here. So, and that's not what we want. So we can, another way to control the mirror axis is by using a mirror object. So if I add, let me just reposition my 3D cursor. So I will just reset it to the center, Shift C, and add Shift A, add an empty, and this will act as our mirror object. So if I select our object again and select this as our mirror object, make sure that I have that selected. Let me shift, need an empty, and then select this as our mirror object. So basically now it controls our mirror axis. So if I move it, you can see that it changes the mirror axis, and you can also rotate this to just change the mirror axis like that. So if you rotate this, I've rotated it 90 degrees to face the opposite direction, but if I rotate this 45 degrees, it will give me this face here. So I just need now to move. So I'm in wireframe, so I just hit Z and then switch to wireframe so that I can see the different points here. So you can also move these to move the mirrored object like that. And you can see this is what we have. So now we only have to worry about making changes here, and they should be reflected on the entire object. Now we just need to mirror this on the other side. So let's see. So let's see if we move in modifiers, you can move them up and back. You can move them to be above different modifiers or below different modifiers, and that will also affect how your mesh is rendered. So if I move this up and let me switch this back again, you can see how we have created this face and this face, but it's not complete. So let's try adding another axis here. You can see how we are just going to use this part here to model all the rest of the elements that go on the object. So now that we have our modifiers corrected, you can see, you can also look at my settings here. I also have a site, blender1on1.com, that I occasionally post some of the screenshots of different settings that I'm using in my project. So if you want to look at these settings as they are here, you can go and check out that website, blender1on1.com, to see the different settings I'll be using here. So yeah, now that we have the modifiers set up, we can come and make this arc or arch that we see here. So let me select this, maybe extend that a bit, and add a loop cut here. And let me see. So I can select this face. Let me go to face mode, select this face, extrude that in, and you can see that all the changes have been implemented on every part of the mesh. But I also don't want this face here, so let me delete that. And I want to create this arc here. So what I can do is select, let me see, what should I select? I can use the bevel tool to make a curve like that. And if you select any tool here, it will some of the tools you select here will come with some settings here. So make sure to check down here to see the settings that come with it. And so the bevel tool comes with the bevel settings here, and we can change the width, number of segments, profile, and things like that. So let's play around with the profile until we get something similar to that. I think that's good enough. Again, we are not trying to be too detailed with this, so that this is easier and feasible for us to make. So, but you see, the problem is that this bevel here has added this n-gon here. Basically, an n-gon is a face with more than 4 vertices, and it's something that is frowned upon in 3D modeling, and you want to avoid that most of the time, but sometimes you can get away with it very easily. So let's just remove this n-gon by selecting one edge, one vertex, and another one, and hitting J to remove that like that. Now we can also remove some of these polygons here. So if you select an edge and hit Ctrl X, you can remove that vertex without distorting the shape of the mesh. So I also want to join this vertex to this edge loop, so I can select to this vertex. So I can select these both these vertex, and then hit J to connect them like that. Also don't like this vertex here, this edge here. So hit Ctrl X to delete that, to have something like this. So we have this shape, and I think it looks good. So let's see. We have this thing here. I don't know, maybe it's a beam. So to do that, I want to keep this simple. So instead of using this here, which is going to make it a bit difficult to work with, I'll just add a new plane, scale it up to fit our object, then drag it up around there. Maybe bring it around there. Go to edit mode, then extrude by using the shortcut E. You can see this is also extruded out and then extruded up. So I'll do that, E, and then scale out, then E, scale up, move up, then E, scale out, E, E, until we get something like that. But you see the edges here are more rounded than we have here. So I can select these edge loops. So just hold down Alt and then left click on an edge to have that selected, but also make sure you hold down Shift to select multiple edge loops like that. And now we can use the bevel modifier to bevel this to give it some rounded edges like that. And we can increase the segments to make them more rounded, and also play around with the profile so that our mesh doesn't intersect with the other mesh. So we have something like that. So you can see that we got the shape, but it's not as smooth as this. So we can, if you right click, you have this options here, and at the top here you have some shading settings. We have smooth shading and flat shading. So right now it's set to flat shading. That is why we are seeing some facets here. So we can right click, change this to smooth shading to smooth the different faces. But the problem this is creating is that it is also smoothing some areas that we don't want to be smooth. So what we can do, we can go to the object settings or object data. This is the icon below the modifier icon, and under that you have the normals. So you want to turn on auto smooth so that we get better smoothing that we have control over. So if you want to remove some of the facets you see there, you can just increase the angle, and that will also smooth out those parts. And yeah, you can see previously we had this, it was smoothing the parts we didn't want to smooth, but right now we have that. I think this can be reused for the bottom here, so I can just select it, Shift D to duplicate, and then Z to move it on the Z axis, like that. So we have something like that. So I don't have a reference. Let me find a reference for the top part here. How that? Okay, this is just a simple roof. But before we go for that, let's make this bottom part. And if you look at the bottom part, it's basically this top part but squished a bit. So what we can do is just duplicate this, Shift D, move it down around there, but then go to edit mode and select these bottom vertices, then push them up to something like that, and we have that. Don't worry about the origin, we can reset it later after we apply the mirror modifier. So let's see, and again, we're not trying to be too detailed. We want to get something very quickly and efficiently, so we're going to reuse this again, and for the top part, so Shift D, move that up like that, and again for the faces here, we can hit Y or we can hit P to separate this face from the rest of the mesh, but maintaining the modifiers that we have here. So you can see these are like windows, so we can add that detail in. So I can select this face, hit I to insert, and then delete that face. You can see we have those aluminium, I don't know how they're called, but another thing we can add to give these, because you can see they're just flat planes right now, we can give them some volume by adding the solidify modifier, which will give it some thickness. So if we increase the modifier a bit, the thickness a bit, you can see what I'm talking about. And I think we need to add those middle bars. So for that, I can just add a loop around here, Control R, move that around there. Let me flatten that. So to flatten it, I just scaled it in the Z direction and hitting 0 to scale everything to be flat. So I also want to bevel this so that we have 2 polygons, but you can see because we changed the bevel settings to have 2 segments, to have more than a few segments, it's adding all the 5 segments there. We can reduce that by just reducing the segments there, or you can just use the shortcut again, Ctrl B to bevel and then drag. So to increase or reduce the segments, you just use your middle mouse wheel, and so to around there. I think we should do the same for this, because we want to bridge this edge to this here, so that we have that middle part. And so maybe I can extend this up here and maybe add a loop here, Ctrl R, bring it that, and then scale this. I also want this to be aligned, so I'll scale them to be the same level. Also scale this to be the same level, and then I can select this and this, and now if I right click, I get these options, and the option I'm looking for is bridge edge loops. You can see that is what we got. If you want to be fancy, you can add a loop around here, bevel that, Ctrl B, and extrude that out just to add a few more details. But remember, what we are creating is quite a lot, so don't add too many details that are going to be hard to replicate in different areas. So let me make sure that I'm saving this. Tilted towers. I'll save that. Tilted towers. So now we are left with the roof, which I have in my reference image here. Again, we're trying to keep things very simple, so what I'll do, I'll just add a plane, scale it to fit our object, push it up in the z-axis, and if I go to edit mode, I can select this vertex and this, hit J to connect them, select this and this, hit J to connect them. Maybe I should bring this image as my reference object. I don't have it here. Let me see if I can save as. So let me just show you the roof. It looks like that, not super complicated. So so now that I have that, I can just pull this vertex and push it up like that. Remember, we're trying to go for a very simple scene, so I can select this bottom, then extrude it down like that, then Ctrl R to add a loop, Ctrl B to bevel, S Shift Z to scale in the X and Y plane, and we have something like that, and maybe extrude that in the Z. So it will depend on how much detailed you want to be, but yeah, you can do whatever you want. For the simple tilted tower we're going for, I think this is good enough. So for the bottom part here, we can add a few details there to close it off. So I need to select this edge loop here, extrude down to have something like that. I think there should be an entrance somewhere here, but I'm not going to add that, just to make things a bit simpler. So another thing I will add is this clock. That should be simple. We can just start with a circle. If you go to the circle settings here, you can align this to view. And I don't want too many segments here or vertices. I can change this to 12 vertices. That's enough resolution for what we are going for. And I can bring this. Let me first make the watch. Then I can select this, extrude that in the x-axis, scale in, move out like that, scale in, hit F to make that interface, basically using extrusion. So in the next video, we'll go on and look at another building. Thank you.